Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the eDiscovery channel. This is Tom O'Connor coming to you from, I don't know if you can hear the thump, thump, thump in the background. We're coming up on Jazz Fest here in New Orleans, and they are building up a storm. You know, they just took 6 months to fix my street, and they've built this entire city out there in 3.5 weeks. I've seen more AT&T trucks up and down the street in the last 10 days than I have in the last than I've seen construction trucks in the last 6 months. It's unbelievable. Um, but anyways, if you hear any noises in the background, that's me. I'm really happy to have with me today Doug Austin, a familiar face to many, if not all of you, I'm sure. Rocky is still off on a hiatus with that, and he decided he's going to work for a living and start a business with his brother.
Go figure.
Yeah, go figure. More power to them. They're actually doing very, very well. Alterny is the company. If you have staffing needs that you want to have a real fresh approach to how to handle that, Rocky and Shimmy messing at Alterny are your guys. And I got no compensation for saying that. They're just good guys with doing good things. So we're really happy to have with us today Joy Holley. Thanks for joining us, Joy. Is an attorney by education and training, and has worked as a consultant in the world of legal operations, which, as I was saying to her before we started, is like the lunar landing for me. That's like a whole other area that I know nothing about. Um, and I'm eager to hear about it. So, Joy, maybe you can start off by uh, giving just a quick, your background, where you're from, where'd you go to school, how'd you get into this wacky business, what made you
Yes.
decide that working with lawyers would be a good idea? Um,
Or
No,
and
thank
being
you.
one too.
oh
Right,
yeah,
right.
yeah, even
Exactly.
worse.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Really admire both of you, and I'm glad to be here with you this morning. So,
Well, hopefully
about
you'll say
me.
that at the end of this interview.
We don't know. We don't know. So, yeah, so a little bit about me. I was born and raised on the East Coast in New York, moved to St. Louis as a teenager, went to University of Missouri in St. Louis with the intent of going into the criminal justice system administration, not as an attorney, but I was going to be a probation officer or something in administration. Ended up taking a juvenile law class that was taught by an adjunct professor who was a federal public defender by day. And she said,
Well,
have you ever thought about going to law school? And I said, me, what? So ended up going to law school at St. Louis University, also in St. Louis. And I fully intended to be a career prosecutor. So I was, OJ
wait a minute,
trial,
wait a minute.
LA
Your
law.
your mentor was a federal defender, and you're going to go to the dark side?
Yes, yes, I know. I know. She was very disappointed about that. But
I'll bet.
yeah, yeah. So I was going to do that, and I did that for 2 years in St. Louis City. I worked at the circuit attorney's office there. And then I had a friend who worked at a large law firm in town, and I defected over there after a couple years and found that work to be really interesting. I worked there for 22 years, always as a litigator. And then about
Wow.
10 years, yeah, about 10 years into my tenure there, of course, I did a lot of complex discovery as a commercial litigator, and managed a lot of document reviews. My first e-discovery case, so to speak, was in 1998 or 99, and it involved getting boxes, bankers' boxes of documents, and there were slip sheets and Scantron sheets in between them. And there were 34, I'll never forget it. There were 34 requests for production, and you took out each document and you filled out the bubbles of which one it was responsive to, and then you put it back in the box, and and so on. So for
Oh
months,
yeah,
that's what we did.
I'm
So
familiar. I,
yeah,
I can
so
see
I
by the
am,
look on Doug's face, he's familiar.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I was from the old school. I mean, I've spent my time in at Iron Mountain and warehouses and all of that. So I've kind of seen it from the beginning. So the firm that I worked for had Ringtail,
All right.
which was one of the web-based platforms, first web-based platforms. And we used a number of platforms, but I sort of that was the beginning of my life as a consumer of legal technology services and litigation support services. So fast forward to about 2007, and I switched over to the business services side of the firm. And my boss was a guy named John Alber, who was a well-known, his title at the firm was Chief Strategic Technology Partner. And when back in a time when nobody had that, no one had an innovation department or anything like that. John was really a pioneer in that sense. And he ran a couple different groups. One was a client technology group. One was a practice economics group. So John was at the forefront of, developing alternative fee structures and really looking at the economics of law and how to run law as a business, because that was his background before he went into law. So he taught me everything I know. And he brought me on. We developed, it was called the Accelerated Review Team. It was at first e-discovery team focused solely on e-discovery. And as the market evolved, we started to do different things, leveraging technology for projects. So started doing due diligence, started doing contract analysis and management, investigations, anything that where we could leverage technology to streamline processes and develop efficiencies. We did that and had a lot of success doing that at the firm. Then fast forward to 2020. Well, so in that period, I was really developing myself and my career as what would become legal operations. So the different competencies of technology and economics and knowledge management and vendor management and all these things. Before that was really recognized as an emerging legal discipline. So when I got an opportunity in 2020 to move over in-house to develop and create a legal operations department, I did that right on the eve of COVID. So those were interesting times. Yeah, so got an opportunity to look at e-discovery from the corporate perspective. And of course, I had done that from the perspective of representing clients, corporate clients, but I really got a lot of insight and new perspective on how investment decisions are made for technology, how they view law firms and discovery processes and the cost and the burdens from the inside. So that was all new to me and really interesting. Then I went into the consulting space. I'm sort of in the consulting space now and looking at it from that aspect too. So what I like to say about myself, what makes me somewhat unique, is that I have that 360-degree view. I've been on all sides of it. I have, seen from different perspectives what goes on, know where the bodies are buried, I guess, where the light switches are. So it's been really interesting to be a part of this emerging industry and to see all the aspects of it. And I've also been really active in the International Legal Technology Association, ILTA, and have had some great opportunities there to work with teams really across the globe and to participate in a lot of really exciting educational developments. And it's just a great industry to be in. And I've really had a great ride in it. So that's kind of in a nutshell.
Very nice. So when you started as director of legal operations, you started really as the pandemic was starting, right? Because so how did you manage that type of process of, hey, I'm coming into a new job, I'm the director of legal operations, and oh, by the way, we're all scattering to the winds and trying to manage legal operations remotely.
Yeah, so it was definitely very interesting. I think that a big part of legal operations as a discipline obviously is change management, right? And this was sort of the COVID kind of provided a master class or a law school final in how to do that. A lot of challenges, but also a lot of opportunities to apply technology in new ways. I mean, here we are on Zoom. When the pandemic first started, I think some companies and firms used Skype, some used nothing at all. We weren't accustomed to talking like this and to using technology in this way. Maybe you had a video for an important expert deposition, but not in your day-to-day communications with your colleagues. So there were a lot of great opportunities to develop new communication channels and platforms to share ideas in new ways and to develop collaboration around those strategies. So I really felt that my background in technology was an important foundation on how to introduce change and how to develop new processes, because the way that we worked was all different. And I remember the GC told me early on, he said, when we first started at home, we thought, oh, it's going to be a couple weeks, then it was going to be a couple months. And he said in the beginning, he said, there will be no return to normal. Nothing's going to be normal after this. There's going to be a new normal, but we will never operate and run a business the same way again. And as it turns out, he was right. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, a lot about wherever there's challenge and change, there's opportunity. So I think in this business, in the e-discovery, litigation support, legal technology business, you have to see things that way, and you have to be a problem solver and someone who is creative about solving business challenges. So, and the pandemic was definitely an opportunity to do that.
Well, speaking of challenges, you just touched on these great new ways of communication, going from conference calls to Skype to Zoom to now Teams. But what's the flip side of that is preserving that as e-discovery, and how difficult that is, or can be. I mean, what were your challenges there? Were people even thinking of it as e-discovery at the beginning?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. And I mean, I'll go back to the law firm days and the corporate commercial litigation that went on. I mean, for so many years, people thought that e-discovery was only email. They didn't consider the scope and what was involved in retaining all the different types of electronic medium that could be relevant in a lawsuit. So, the broad definition of document, in the federal rules and what we see in some of these requests and the instructions, people looked at it far too narrowly for far too long. And there's still, I see in state court in particular, you hear certain litigants they're really only talking about, email or text messages, like say you have a divorce case, here's a nasty Facebook message you gave me or something like that. But I think that was the starting point and the shaky foundation that we had, is that before COVID, all these things were viewed too narrowly too often. So, so now it really challenges, IT departments, corporate clients, on what those mediums are. What are your policies surrounding those? What are your document retention programs and policies surrounding these types of mediums? And how are you educating your employees on how to use those and how not to use those? And every time we see a piece of litigation that makes headlines about something in discovery, it's inevitably something that someone said that's unfortunate. Email, we talked about, well, it's too easy to be casual in email. Well, in text and IM and everything else, I mean, it's even more so. So I think it's really important to educate employees from day one on the responsibilities really of using these platforms with integrity and so really, as they say, imagine that every communication that you send is going to be on the front page of the New York Times. I mean, that really is true. You need to be very responsible stewards as you use these types of communications.
We had a great governor down here many years ago. Well, some people consider him great. Other people were not so thrilled. But Louis, or the Kingfish, was renowned for his kind of stronghold on Louisiana politics. But he had Huey Long. He had a great saying, which was, I thought, very prescient for his times. Never put in writing what you can say on the telephone. Of course, now that doesn't matter anymore either. Never say on the telephone what you can whisper in somebody's ear, I guess.
Right.
But in addition to not, like you said, everybody thought e-discovery's email. Preserving it and then getting into court are two different things. I see it, especially in state courts. We did a presentation down here, and the judge said, here's my biggest problem. Lawyer's arguing something in front of me, and he pulls up his cell phone. And he goes, look at this. Look what I got off of Facebook. And the judge is going, whoa, time out. Right? That's evidence. You have to treat it like evidence. You can't, you wouldn't pull up a piece of paper and say, look at this, Your Honor. Look what I just found. It's almost like people don't think the rules apply. And that's got to be difficult for somebody in your position is, hey, we got to have some definitions here about what's what and what you're supposed to do with it. Doug, is one of the cases we're going to be talking about on our case law webinar later, is about what are the policies? and procedures for how you preserve this stuff and deal with it. And well, wait a minute, what do you mean you don't have any policies?
Right. Right.
um,
Right. Not only do many entities not have policies, but those that do too often don't enforce them, or nobody
yeah,
knows what they are.
yeah,
So yeah, that's really frustrating. And I think especially so, it seems so in state court. And I think in a lot of the types of disputes that you see there, domestic type disputes, divorces, custody cases, some of the, even, many of the criminal cases now have involve
yep,
evidence that has,
Oh,
yep,
they're big
or
time.
Internet of
absolutely,
Things. So yeah,
absolutely.
biometric data, all of this. So I think it's incumbent upon practitioners to take an active role in educating the bar. At the Bar Association of Metropolitan St. Louis, or BAMSL, which is my local bar association, we have an e-discovery committee, we have an innovation and legal technology committee. And I think it's incumbent to have those resources for practitioners and also for judges. So I've spoken before at the Judicial College for state court judges, and I think, we're going to open the AI box at some point. I mean,
Oh, wait a minute,
particularly.
Oh,
wait a minute. We
yeah.
went, we
Tom,
went
cover
28
your
minutes.
ears, okay?
We went
Time,
Tom,
28
time.
minutes. I feel like
Yeah.
Groucho
nobody's
Marx.
talking
Say the
about
word,
AI.
I
now comes the
know,
bird.
I know, but especially, when you talk about evidentiary foundation, you
Yeah,
have to have strict policies in place, and really, I think that the existing rules can deal with it, but we definitely have to modify some of the parameters there, and really have a thorough understanding of how they're going to be treated in terms of authentication and laying a foundation for judicial proceedings.
yeah. So where does that put you? You've worked all of those arenas, the corporate side, the law firm side. I mean, I've said before, I often feel like I'm an interpreter between, you know, in my case, with a law firm, the IT people and the lawyers. But you've even ramped that up a level to the corporate people and the outside counsel, and how do they talk to each other? How do they decide? Um, where's that all headed? Is that what legal operations is about? Is that what I'm missing when I don't go to clock?
Well, come in a few weeks and you'll find out, you can find out for yourself. So yeah, I think that attorneys and e-discovery professionals who have those abilities to sort of stand on the bridge to talk to both, technical professionals and lawyers. And, I think it's a misnomer that people say that lawyers aren't technical. I mean, that's a pretty broad brush. I think that some of them aren't, but many of them are. Many of them are very, savvy and interested in how to use technology to best serve their clients. And I think that lawyers coming up, law students starting their careers in particular, any discovery professionals, that one of our strongest competencies is that interpretation piece, is that ability to understand and explain the business purposes or the business challenges, and why you can't commit to this kind of a case management order, and why the technology isn't like pressing an easy button, and to talk to both sides. And in some sense, you are a mediator. You're acting as a mediator between the client, the law firm, the court. And I think practitioners that have those skills are very marketable, are very versatile, and able to really be flexible in the industry. So they're great it all goes back to communication, right? It's and what we're talking about, email, the electronic documents, Facebook, they're all ways that we communicate with each other. So, I mean, that becomes more complicated, but hopefully it helps us understand each other better if there are these interpreters who can speak to everyone.
Sure. Well,
Right.
and from a standpoint of interpretation, it's not really just two languages. It's not just the IT and the legal. It's also project management. I found a lot of IT people and legal people who don't know anything about project management. So you've got to introduce that and set some expectations and discuss that and teach them on that, right? And how do you go about getting them kind of more adopting the best practices around the disciplines, not just the core disciplines?
You know,
Yeah.
it's
So
funny. Funny you should say that, Doug. I I mentioned my street project here, and it was behind schedule. And we had a little neighborhood pool. They started last June,
Oh,
and it
wow.
was a big project. It was storm drains, sewers, water pipes, sidewalks, the pavement, everything. But I had a bet in the neighborhood. We had a neighborhood pool that it wouldn't finish before Jazz Fest, right? And last June, that seemed like a ridiculous bet. And here we are. They're out paving today, feverishly trying to get this done, and it's not going to happen. They're not going to be done. And so our city councilman, my city councilman, is a young lawyer here in town, and he said, how did you know that? How did you understand? And I said, project management. I said, there's one thing I've learned in my business. It's that somebody's got to own this project and run herd. And it's just like e-discovery. At the beginning, they started, it was easy. They dug up the street and they brought in the pipes. We start with a whole bunch of data and we process it. That part's easy. Then you got to do something with it and move it around and give it to the other side and review it. And, as you get closer and closer to the end, project management becomes more and more critical, because now you got 10 different people doing 10 different things, and somebody's got to be able to herd those cats. And you're right, Doug. Project management is just a key factor that I think is too often overlooked. So I told Joe to my councilman's Joe Geruso. I told him to buy Mike Quadraro's book on project management. Right?
Yes, I
There
was
you
just going to
go.
mention that. Yeah,
I said you can use this for all sorts of different endeavors, not just e-discovery.
well, exactly. And Doug and I have actually spoken about this before on a panel, but I think that project management skills and really advanced legal project management skills are probably the strongest competency that e-discovery professionals have. And what I've been thinking about and writing about most recently is how those skills translate to AI, how they translate to investigations and diligence surrounding a firm or a corporate client's decision-making process of whether to invest in a certain piece of technology. How do you come up with business cases? How do you document policies and procedures? Because it's clear the law and the judicial guidance is not so clear, but one thing that is clear, what we've seen so far, is that the court is going to very closely scrutinize methodology and what process goes in. It's almost like when we had TAR and CAL and 15 years ago, where the courts are not going to tolerate a black box. So you have to have all those processes and documentation in place. And who is the most accustomed to doing that? It's e-discovery professionals. So all of those skills, including the vendor management piece, because I think what we're going to see is many law firms and companies, that's not their core business. They're not going to develop their own LLMs. They're not going to, make certain investments in being the developers themselves. They're going to work in tandem with technology vendors. Many of the e-discovery professionals who you would leverage for these types of exercises, the vendors are the same in many cases. They're a lot of this technology. This is another thing I talk about. A lot of this technology, really the backbone of it, was developed in the e-discovery space, in the advanced analytics space. And in that sense, what's new is old in a sense, right? I think that people who are scared of AI, and there's certainly a lot to be considered, but it's not scary to people who have been in the e-discovery industry for a long time, because we've seen these evolutions and these advancements in analytical capabilities. And I think that e-discovery professionals are really your best bet in developing a team, a committee, to look into these issues, and their experience is invaluable.
And you mentioned KM a couple of times now. And I always harken back to that, especially as we've gotten deeper and deeper into AI. People like Ron Friedman or Peter Krakauer, who I knew years and years ago when they were KM experts at their law firms, and kind of like, yeah, go away, little boy, you bother me. Right? And if we had listened a little bit more to what they were talking about, a lot of that expertise in the KM world has come full circle.
It really has. I mean, law is a knowledge business. I mean, a law firm, what are you selling? You're selling your knowledge, you're selling your work product, you're selling your ability to find an answer. And too many law firms have these vast, storage, document management systems and repositories of this information. But if you don't know how to use it, if you don't know how to find it, not only can you not market that and sell it, but you don't have clean data to execute on any of these AI projects. If you're a law firm and you think you want to leverage, some kind of a common use case is to do something in the contract management space or the contract drafting space. Where are your contracts? So many firms don't know that. Where is the work product, and how is it stored? How is it profiled? How is it managed, categorized, so that you can find what it is you want to use as the basis for the automation that you want to develop. So, developing, and having really good data hygiene is unfortunately something that many firms haven't focused on.
Like
to your point about KM. So I do think that's another, sort of sub space of the industry that needs to be really focused on and leveraged.
Right. Well, listen, we're starting to get close to the end here, so now we go to the fun question part of the of the thing. Couple of softball lobs. What's your favorite book? What's your summer reading look like?
Well, so it really has nothing to do with e-discovery. I was thinking about
There
this.
we go.
So actually, and I've read it several times. My favorite book is The Prince of Tides.
Oh,
So, and by Pat Conroy. I've read that. It's
Sure.
a thick one, and I've read it many times. I love that story. And Tom, maybe you can relate.
Yeah.
Well, all of us loving the water and loving that type of the Carolinas and everything. So I love The Prince of Tides. That is one of my favorite books.
Great. How about favorite food?
Oh my gosh. That's like, picking between children, right? It's so I mean, I would say it's probably a tie between I love ice cream.
Ooh.
Love ice cream. And also from my days of growing up in New York, I love a good slice of New York pizza.
There you go.
So
I'm
if
glad
I
you
had
said
my
New
last
York
meal,
pizza.
yeah.
Yeah.
If I had
Yeah.
my last meal, it would be those two things probably.
Good New York pizza and good ice cream. Yeah.
Yeah. Why not? Carvel. How about that? So
Oh,
yeah.
I'm from New England, so I'm a Friendly's guy. Friendly's
Okay.
started in Massachusetts, years and years
Nothing
ago.
wrong with that. I'll eat
No.
that too. So
Yeah. Doug, any last thoughts?
Well, hey, we were talking about music before you got on, and you were talking about your husband being a parrot head before there were parrot heads. So we were let's talk about music for a minute. He's a parrot head. Is Jimmy Buffett your favorite, or do you have another favorite out there?
well, I can't be married to someone for 28 years without developing an appreciation for Buffett.
Sure.
So certainly I have that. We just had a couple days ago, I think, the 8th anniversary of the death of Prince. And he
right.
was, I love Prince,
Wow,
and
it's been 8 years. Gosh, that's amazing.
yeah, I know it seems like yesterday, but he's probably my favorite, going back to, like the first record or the first, tape, remember cassette tapes, that I ever had was probably Prince. And that was my first concert that,
Wow.
I have to pick him.
Wow. Okay, very cool.
Okay. Speaking of music, Beatles or Stones?
Stones.
There we go. I knew.
Oh man, I'm 0 for 1. Man. Darn it.
It has to be. Yeah. Yeah.
So our last question is always with our guests. If you could spend a day with anybody from our profession, and that's been interpreted very loosely, from everybody to Archimedes to Abraham Lincoln, to Bill Gates. But if you could spend the day with one person from our profession, who would it be, and what would you do? Not necessarily profession related. Would it be a relaxing event?
So I'm going to go back. I mentioned my my boss and mentor, John Alber. So John Alber has been retired for a few years now, and he lives in Apalachicola. So he has a boat. He spent several years with his wife living on a boat, and they love boating and kayaking. And I just, as I mentioned, my husband's from Panama City Beach, and I love that part of the country. So I would probably spend the day on a boat with John, asking him about what the next 20 years in legal technology
Ooh,
looks like, and what
that would be
he
fun.
sees in the future. You know, he is a futurist, and I just am always fascinated by what he has to say about what's coming up. Not now, not in 5 years, but in 10 or 20 years. So
Oh
I
man,
would
we should rope him in
probably
for
do
an
that.
interview. That'd be a great
Oh,
chat,
yeah,
right?
you would love it. You
Wow.
would love it. So yeah,
And maybe I could get to go to Apalachicola and sit on the boat.
Do it
I think so.
do it in person. Yes, I think.
Yeah, exactly. That's when you need to go in person. So
That would have to be a
yeah,
field
I
trip,
can.
right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
right. So
Well, Joy, thanks so much for joining us. I won't be at Clock, unfortunately. Um, After Jazz Fest, I'm going to have to recuperate. Well, it's in just a couple weeks, right? So it's right at the tail end of Jazz Fest.
Right. Yeah. The first full week of May. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the first weekend of May is the second weekend of JagFest. So I will be in full tilt recuperation mode for the week after that.
yeah,
Get all
we
the family
understand.
out of the house, first of all. All the relatives I didn't even know I had who want to sleep on my living room floor. And so that, but I plan on being at ILTA if you're going to be at ILTA this year.
Yes,
It's going to
planning
be
on
in
that as well.
Nashville. Nashville's
Yeah.
so close. I'm looking
is.
forward to doing that, so we can get together and chat there. I know Doug will be everywhere as always.
Yeah. Where in the world is Doug Austin? Yes, but Doug,
I'll be at Clock and I'll be
you.
at ILTA. I can't speak for too many others, but
There you go.
definitely
All
we'll
right.
see you in a couple of weeks, Joy.
All right.
Okay, excellent. Thank you again for having me.
My pleasure. Thanks for joining us.
Great.